This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. How is everybody? How are you guys doing? I am recording this intro from my hotel room out in Mexico City. I've been out here all week. I've been to Mexico a lot of times, traveled all over, but somehow never made it to the capital. It's a pretty amazing city. And it's pretty crazy how vibrant the scene is down here, too. You know, I've got a bunch of friends playing shows. Even in the week that I'm here, a bunch of people are coming through. And the local scene is so crazy, too. It's just got me thinking about, you know, how amazing it is, how connected we are by music, and how music can sort of take us around the world. And my guest this week knows that better than a lot. He has been touring for over 20 years. He is a legend in the drum and bass world. I've got Dieselboy on the show. And look, I had been wanting to talk to him for a while for a variety of reasons. But before I get into all of that, it's important that you know he's got a new mix dropping next month, early March, called Heart of Darkness. And he's going on tour. Speaking of touring, he's going on a world tour right after he drops the mix. He's going all over North America, Europe, Russia. If you want to see technical, top tier mixing, 4 decks at a time, you have to go see Dieselboy. I'm going to put a link in the description of this episode where you can go check him out, find all the tour dates, the new mix. All of that will be linked in the description. And if that wasn't enough, he's also going on the 20-year anniversary tour for the Planet of the Drums tour, which is the longest running, the biggest drum and bass tour ever in North America. That's him, AK-1200, DJ Dara, and their MC. And if that wasn't enough, Dieselboy's a man of many talents. We're going to talk about that in this show. But he's also got a new beer coming out, a beer collaboration with Adroit Theory Brewing out of Virginia. The beer's called Mountain Mother. So if you're a beer head, check that out. We're going to talk to Dieselboy in just a second. Before we do, let's take care of the business off the top. Last week, you may have noticed, I dropped an episode, part 2, Flostradamus returns to the show. The first return guest, and actually the video for that episode is out right now. We went to the Serato Studios in LA, recorded it on video. So if you want to check out that whole conversation, if you missed it last week, check my socials, or you can check the link in the description of this episode. I'm going to link to where you can go find that video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel on whatever platform you're using to listen. And if you're a new listener, that's especially key for you. If you have just started listening to the show, welcome. Hey, what's up? I highly recommend you go scroll back in the feed, check out some of the older episodes. I guarantee I've had a conversation with at least one of your favorite artists already, and lots more to come. You could actually go do a double shot. You could check out the first Flostradamus episode, which was one of the first that I actually recorded for this show. That's episode number 6. And then you can listen to the one we just dropped last week, see what's changed, see how we've progressed in the last year and a half. We've known each other forever. We just start riffing right off the bat. They're always super fun episodes. So go check that out. And another episode that's on my mind, because I'm in Mexico City right now, and so is she, is episode number 48 with Jubilee. She's one of my favorites, Miami-born, Brooklyn representer. She's hilarious. She's got a great perspective on what it means to be an artist in this day and age. One of my favorite just all-around DJs. That conversation was super fun too, so go check that out. Episode 48 with Jubilee. And once you've done that, once you checked out some old episodes, got a feel for the show, you can always reach out to me with any questions you might have, any concerns, any comments. My email is backtobackpod@gmail.com, or you can hit me up at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. You can let me know who you want to hear on the show too. You know, throw up a post, let your favorite artists know you want to see them on this show. We have actually gotten some guests that way before. You might be surprised, but you know, for the most part, artists do read everything you send them, and I definitely love meeting everybody who listens to this show. And speaking of meeting people, speaking of posting, I always make this point. If you want to support this show, I get asked a lot, how can I donate or how can I help out? And the real answer is the best way to support me, the best way to support this show and help us grow is just by word of mouth, spreading the word. So if you have any friends who just love music the way you do, anybody you think would enjoy this kind of show, just let them know. Put them on to back to back. Or you could put up a post, tell people you're listening, tell them to go check it out. I'll always retweet those, repost those. You could repost something I put up. All of that really helps. It helps the show grow. It helps us get better guests for all of you. And, just in general, it makes me so stoked to keep working, keep improving, and keep putting out great episodes for everyone out there every single week. But all right, I want to get into this week's episode with Dieselboy. I was excited to do this for a lot of different reasons. One reason is that Dieselboy is the kind of artist I really love because not only has he had an amazing career, all these achievements, notches on his belt, but he's also extremely influential in ways that a lot of people don't really know. And I love exploring that. I love talking about those hidden connections, parts of an artist's career that had a little butterfly effect, affected all these other artists' careers in ways that people may not have even realized. Those are the stories I love to tell. Dieselboy has a lot of them. He's really a legend in the true sense of that word. We talk about, his early days of touring before he had, anyone supporting him behind him. He was doing it all himself, and his DIY mentality carries through to this day. It's really inspiring, and he's a man of many talents. He's done some competitive cooking stuff in his life. I think won some awards, but either way, he's a crazy chef. And he's also a graphic designer. He's the head designer for a clothing company I'm obsessed with called Death Saves, which is a Dungeons & Dragons themed streetwear line. I'm a huge D&D guy. I haven't talked about that much on the show, but it's weird. It's been coming up a lot lately. So you're going to hear me talk about that a little more. But I love everything Dieselboy does. He's just a creative force. But before we jump in, don't forget the new Heart of Darkness mix from Dieselboy drops in early March. These mixes are legendary. This is kind of how he made his name originally. Nobody can put out a mix like Dieselboy. So keep an eye out for that. He's going on a whole tour based off the Heart of Darkness theme. All those dates are going to be in the link in the description of this episode, as well as the Planet of the Drums 20th anniversary tour. So keep an eye peeled for all of that. And right now, let's get into it because I love this episode. This is me and Dieselboy back to back. Let's go. I have so many questions about the early U.S. D&B days, but one of my big things was always U.S. MCs who would affect the British accent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my. I'm not going to do it. Step it up, step it in. DJ Dieselboy. P1.
Yeah.
Yep. Say like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. You flew in from where? From Brooklyn?
Yes, I flew in from JFK. I woke up at 5:30 this morning.
Damn.
Yep. Good times.
Which is like 2:30 a.m. West Coast time. So you're feeling good.
Feeling real good.
When did you move out to Brooklyn?
I moved to Brooklyn in, I think, 2004. Before that, I was in Philly. But my girl at the time was living in New York, and she basically put her foot down and said, I'm not moving to Philly, fuck Philly, so you have to move to New York if you want to keep going with me. So, but I love New York City. It's my favorite city in the world.
Well, and at a certain point, especially back in like 2004, I think for DJing, there was a really vibrant, strong scene in New York. Not that there isn't now, but I feel like it's a little different now.
Yeah, there's always been a scene in New York for drum and bass. Even when I moved in 2004, like drum and bass, in my opinion, was never really that big in New York. We had Concrete Jungle, we had Direct Drive with some other weeklies, but it was never a big scene. And now the scene in New York, I don't really go out to clubs, so it's hard to say, but my vibe is it's a lot of kind of little techno nights here, house night there. I mean, I'm not talking about the big clubs, the big cheesy bottle service douchebag clubs, but it's a lot of like tiny scenes. And then you have some big shows in the summer like Electric Zoo, which is like your big festival type play. But New York's one of the cities I've never really had my finger on the pulse of what's going on with regards to clubs. Like I'd get booked and I had no idea if it would be, tumbleweeds on the dance floor or be busy.
Yeah.
It's
one of those towns. I mean, New York, I think, it will humble any artist, right? Because New York doesn't care about you.
Totally.
And there's so much going on every single night of the week. There's a million different venues.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I don't really go out that much anymore. Very little at all. So it's hard to really say like what's popping off.
I mean, that's a funny DJ thing too, right? Like I think most of us professional working DJs don't go out much, right? Unless it's our gig.
I feel, I mean, that's the way I think it ends up. But I think early on, most DJs are hyped to be in the scene. So people do go out all the time. I used to try to go out as much as I could when I lived in Pittsburgh when I was starting out. But yeah, once DJing becomes your job full time, it's like you don't want to go hang out at the office.
You process it differently. Like I listened to a lot of comedians' podcasts, and I was listening to them sort of talking about how if a group of comedians, I forget who was saying it, but a group of comedians, like the funniest people in the country, all get in a room and they'll tell each other jokes. Someone will say like the best joke of the day, and everyone else will just sort of sit there and be like, "Oh yeah, that's really funny."
Yeah.
I feel like it's the same with us with music now. Like how do you maintain that excitement as somebody who's been dedicated to drum and bass for so long?
I mean, my technique is pretty simple. I just don't really listen to drum and bass when I'm not DJing because when I go out on the weekend, I mean, I'll listen to music, listen to promos, or kind of like go through tunes to get an idea like what I might want to be playing on the weekend or whatever. But if I don't listen to drum and bass all week, I tend to listen to really mellow music, honestly, or metal if I'm at the gym or feeling angry. But when I go out and I'm hearing drum and bass for the first time in like a week or whatever, it's way more exciting. It's like, it's like not eating steak every day. I get to eat it on the weekend, so it's something to look forward to. That's what keeps it fresh for me. Back in the day, I used to listen to drum and bass and rave music and dance music, whatever, all the time, and I was cool with it, but I was young.
Yeah, it's definitely different when you're just getting into it and everything's new and exciting.
Yeah. I like to listen to my indie rock. That's kind of like that's where my heart is most of the time. And then when I go to the club, it's just like, it's such a cool little shock. It's like cold water in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's true. You can kind of get that spark back. And I think it's important too, like if indie rock is like kind of your thing where you can just be a fan of it.
Yeah.
Like this is something I say on this show all the time. I think every artist needs something they can just be a fan of and not be involved in.
Yeah, because when I go out, I mean, as you know, you go out, if you know DJing, it's like if you go out and the DJ's great, you'll have a great time. If the DJ's mediocre, you'll have a less of a great time. And if the DJ's bad, you'll be very upset. So I have a hard time going out listening to bad DJing. And my threshold for what I want to hear in a DJ is much higher nowadays. So if I go out and hear someone kind of just like lazily doing it, it just makes me mad. But yeah, it's like my brother's a film director, and I know he can't watch anything that's filmed without, breaking it down into molecules in his brain. Like he can't just enjoy it for what it is. So
of course,
I enjoy my indie rock because I don't know how to play any instruments really, so I could just kind of appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, there you go. I feel exactly the same way. There's certain genres of music that I can just, especially for me, it's just people who are really good singers, like somebody with a great voice, because I can't sing at all. I have a terrible singing voice.
Same.
Yeah, and it's the most affecting thing to me when I see somebody who can. And I like that there's still some magic, some shit that just like I don't understand.
100%. Yeah, you don't always need to see how the sausage is being made in every creative thing that you're interested in.
Absolutely.
It just keeps it exciting.
Well, I mean, so how did that excitement start for you? You mentioned you were in Pittsburgh early. Is that where you grew up?
No, I grew up in small towns. Started my life in Florida till I was 6, moved to Colorado, lived in a town that I think at this point has a population of 650 people.
Nice.
I was first to 8th grade. High school, Oil City, Pennsylvania, which has a population of 12,000 people.
Why were you moving around so much?
My mom got divorced when I was young, so we moved to live with my grandmother actually in Colorado, and then eventually my mom remarried. I was out in Colorado, and then we moved to Pennsylvania because he got transferred in his job. He got transferred to Quaker State, which is headquartered in Oil City. I think along with Pennzoil. It's why it's called Oil City.
Oh, interesting.
And then I actually applied to Northwestern in Chicago and got rejected, and got accepted at Emory in Atlanta, but then just decided to go to state college because it was cheaper. So I went to University of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
That's where I started DJing.
And before that, were you musical at all, or was music a big part of your life?
My memory is like I wasn't, but then as I've gotten older, I've started, recalling things like I DJ'd some of my junior high dances. I DJ'd some of my high school dances. I won a dance contest. I had a breakdancing crew, and I lived in this small town in Colorado called Bronx Crew. Okay. And I remember I got this break-in 12-inch that had a poster inside with the moves, and the thing is, I was into music, but not at the time realizing that that's what it was. I was just kind of being a kid or being young. And it was funny, I forgot that I DJ'd high school dances until I was about 4 or 5 years into being Dieselboy. Then I was like, oh shit, I actually brought music, sound equipment to the school and DJ'd these high school dances. I wasn't really mixing, I was fading between stuff.
But still, you were the guy who said, like, I want that job.
Yeah, and it's weird because I guess I always have kind of been into music. Just instinctively. My dad's a singer. My dad's like an old one-hit wonder, famous singer.
Really?
Yeah, my dad.
Would I know the hit?
You might. He wrote and sang a song called Key Largo from the early '80s. Okay, it was on VH1's Top One-Hit Wonders, VH1's Top 40 Love Songs. And it's funny that, side note, my dad, a B-side of his, a track called Casablanca, went on to become the most popular karaoke song in Asia. So like a few years ago, my dad sang on the Chinese New Year's special, and it was just him and Michael Bolton. It was 1.5 billion people saw it. It's just totally fucking weird. But people that know my dad as a musician always ask me, is it because of my father that I got into music? And the answer is absolutely not. Like I thought my dad's music was just not for me. Yeah. It's very yacht rock kind of stuff.
Was he trying to make that a career, like after the hit, you know?
Yeah. My dad has continued to sing. My dad has put out, I don't know how many albums, 16 albums, 20 albums. Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, he's still out there doing it. But my dad, it's weird. My dad's a musician, but that had no effect on me. I think maybe it had effect on me genetically in a way. My brother played drums in a punk rock band and then went on to be in a bluegrass band. But my other brother, that's not the film director. I think it's just there's a creative gene in me that kind of pushed me to do something creative, and the first entry point was music.
Sure, and I think as kids too, I mean, if you just see your dad doing that kind of work, even if it's not something you're interested in at the time, I feel like just being in that environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go to studios with my dad when I'd visit him, and I'd meet people. I think there's like a cable station called Nashville, or a show called Nashville Now on the Country Music Channel, and I was like in the audience at one of his shows and got interviewed by the guy, the host. So I was, peripherally exposed to this stuff, but it had nothing to do with me getting into DJing. Just kind of, I fell into DJing.
Sure. Well, I mean, and at the time, like, say you're DJing that high school dance, what kind of music are you playing?
The high school dances, I was playing New Order, Depeche Mode. I was playing a lot of New Jack Swing, so a lot of Guy, a lot of anything produced by Teddy Riley. I was playing Bobby Brown. So kind of a mix between those two things. And then I got Best Dancer in my high school because I was super into wearing drop crotch hammer pants and dancing and studying, slow motioning Yo MTV Raps and Soul Train and like studying all the dance moves.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was really into all that stuff.
And so how does electronic music come into the picture?
Yeah, so my sister would listen to, she was listening to like Depeche Mode, New Order, and that was kind of my entry point into synth pop, I guess. And then once I started going down that rabbit hole, I started trying to collect like any band that sounded like Depeche Mode or New Order. And then slowly, then I went and saw Depeche Mode play a concert in Pittsburgh, and their opening band was Knights of Reb. So I found out Knights of Reb was opening, did not know them, got their album, and then discovered Nine Inch Nails, first album, and then discovered Industrial. And that's just kind of like you kind of go down the rabbit hole and you start exploring those things. And then I was at a Front 242 concert in Pittsburgh. I had broken my ankle skateboarding, so I was kind of hanging in the back. And this guy came up to me, worked at a record shop, or I bought Industrial stuff. And he's like, "Hey, you got to check out this track, Anastasia by T99." And so I went to this 12-inch dance record store, and they had a compilation for $30 on CD, XL Recordings Volume 2. He played it for me, and as soon as I heard the stabs, the techno stabs, I was like, I was like, I need to get into this. And so I bought the CD. I didn't even own a CD player. It was $30, which was a ton of money for me back then in college. I was broke.
Right.
But I had to have it. It was like this magical item.
Yeah.
And then that began my journey down like meeting some local DJs and just getting into discovering, back then it was like breakbeat hardcore and house music and some trance. So just really getting into that scene.
Yeah, I mean, I got into electronic music through old school breakbeat hardcore. And the first thing I ever DJ'd was happy hardcore.
Oh.
And
what year was this?
This was late 90s. I think I started in 97, 98, something like that.
You and AC Slater.
I know. I had him on this show. He does not like to talk about that.
It's funny. Yeah, I didn't know about that part of his past until he was Mr. Techno guy or Techno House guy. It's funny. I actually when I started DJing in the early part of the 90s, people know me for playing drum and bass or early breaks or whatever, but I used to play house, techno, trance, happy, hardcore. I played all that stuff in my set. I was pretty multi-genre DJ back then.
Well, sure. And I mean, from what it sounds like, you started buying records and DJing really before drum and bass was drum and bass, right? That
name didn't exist. Jungle didn't exist. We called it breakbeat, but in England it was hardcore. And then it got darker. It was called Dark Side, which was a name or a genre title that most people don't even remember. And then they started calling it jungle because there were all these Rasta samples and like hip hop samples and chopped up breaks.
Right. That
became the name for it. It was music from the urban jungle. And then drum and bass kind of became this more generalized term because the music kept branching off and evolving and splintering, and drum and bass just became the umbrella term for it.
Sure, yeah. And I think, genre nerds and drum and bass, is a nerdy genre to be sure. We love making those little subdivisions.
Sure.
But I think that's not necessarily the best way to get a lot of people interested.
Yeah, I mean, the one
I think everything needs that blanket.
Yeah, the thing about drum and bass and jungle, though, is people argue about, is it jungle, is it drum and bass? And one's, anyone that's from before the time or of the very beginning of that knows that jungle and drum and bass are the same thing.
Right.
But I guess if you nitpick, jungle is a specific style of drum and bass.
Yeah, it's...
But it's jungle. I used to be called just jungle. All of it was just jungle.
Right,
so to me,
right.
it's just... It's the same thing.
Yeah, and it's funny to me, like, hearing you talk about finding that one XL compilation that, you spent all your money on. It's funny to think that, like, music used to be scarce, and that finding something like that, like, you could have been the only person in your city who found that for a month,
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the one, barring all the new technology and internet and MP3s, that's the one thing that really is lost from that time is, back then there was finite music, so you could only access certain amounts of music. Now, when everything has unlimited copies, it's like you get a more homogenous DJ sets. There's a homogenous sound that takes place when you go to shows that you hear. Back in the day, when you were fighting over white labels or just obscure records or whatever, it's like everyone sounded really different because, there's only so much music to go around.
Right, and you literally might be the only person with a copy of whatever song.
There were tracks that I played that I was the only person I ever heard play these tracks. So in my mind, they were like my tunes because I'd never heard anyone play them. There's something special about it when it's scarce. I mean, once things are widely available to everybody, it loses its luster a bit.
That's absolutely right. And I
with
think,
anything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's an object lesson in branding and marketing.
Totally.
You know, even for people who are trying to figure out a career in this day and age, like that's one of the most important maxims, I think.
Yeah.
But I am curious, you know, so you're going into college in Pittsburgh, is that right?
Yeah, University of Pittsburgh.
Right. And is there like a DJ scene there at that time?
So what happened was I was buying music, and then I decided that I started going out. Some people were throwing like these small little raves or small parties or whatever. So I went to a few of them, and I immediately noticed I'm not hearing any of these tracks off my CDs that I have at these shows. And I'm like, I want to put on a show where people can hear these tracks. So I threw 3 tiny house party rave type things. One of them was at a frat house. 2 of them were at someone else's house. I promoted them. I made my own smart drinks. I made my own flyer. I taught myself graphic design, made my own flyer. And
wait, hold on one sec, because you said smart drinks, and I feel like that's a phrase that is not heard anymore.
Yeah, so smart drinks were basically like some kind of like Kool-Aid type drink that had like like chemicals are supposed to improve your brain, but a lot of times there's just like crushed up no-dos, which was what was in my smart drink. And I'll give away the secret recipe.
Exclusive.
So yeah, so I promoted it. I did everything myself. And by the third one, I had met these 2 guys that had a 6-hour Friday night radio show on Carnegie Mellon's radio station, WRCT. They called themselves the Techno Terrorists. And I met them. They came to one of my parties, and they invited me on their show so they'd give me an hour of their show so I could play my music, because they were hurting for new tunes to play, so they could bring me on and had an extra hour of new stuff. And via that show, they taught me the basics of DJing, beat matching. It was actually quite challenging, because the way it was set up in the studio was that you could have something playing over the air, and you could be cueing something in headphones. But once you brought the other track on, into the mix, you could not cue it separately in the headphones. So it became like you were hearing both tracks simultaneously.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And as a new DJ that doesn't know how to beat match very well, terribly actually. I mean, I train wrecked many nights.
Do you think it was kind of like that thing where, before a batter goes up to the plate, they have the donuts on the bat, so it's a little heavier? Like, did it make you better in the end?
I mean, all that stuff makes you better. I mean, I would always think back in the day, playing on like shitty turntables made you better, because you're playing like shitty belt drive fucking turntables, Geminis or whatever, and then you finally play on 1200s. It's like, you're behind the wheel of a Lamborghini. It's like a night and day difference. But yeah, I kind of earned my stripes via trial by fire by doing that, but I learned how to DJ from those guys. I'll always be thankful that they taught me DJing.
And you're known as obviously a very technical DJ. Was that a thing early on?
I feel that early on, once I've got beat matching down, I was known to be a very fast DJ. People would always comment that I could mix very quickly, and that was kind of like my skill, is that I could just segue very quickly and also like ride mixes a long time. It used to be a thing like you'd play a show and you'd get 2 tracks on beat, and then you'd like turn around and have a conversation with someone in the DJ booth and like drink something and just like have your back to the decks, and like they would never go off. That was like a fucking big dick grabbing move.
Especially back in the vinyl days.
Yeah, I think I used to play drums in school, so I think I had an affinity for like catching rhythms, and I think I got to be more well known compared to some of the local DJs is because I'm a highly competitive person, and I think I got to be good at DJing quicker than most people. And
was that part of the fun of it for you, like putting the puzzle together,
totally.
layering?
Yeah, it's the fun of doing anything in life is, like you want to. I mean, that's the way I approach any creative project that I enjoy or I'm passionate about. Is you want to be the best. You want to push yourself. So for DJing, it was like unlocking the puzzle, and then it became like, how can I add bells and whistles to make it even better? The one thing I didn't do was learn how to scratch very well, because I learned early on. For me, I mean, there's plenty of great DJs that know how to scratch. You might have heard of Z-Trip.
Nah, I've never heard of him.
But I learned right away. I was like, okay,
He's so dumb.
Zach's in the studio with us. I learned right away that I I didn't have a natural quick affinity for it, and I knew that it would take a lot of work to do it. And I was like, I don't need to know how to do this. I'll just focus on DJing. And plus, it ended up becoming it didn't really add enough flavor to my sets as it would have taken, like, the time I would have had to put into it. So I'm like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I actually had a very, very similar experience. I was never great at scratching, and I think it's important in any creative pursuit, you have to figure out your perspective and your angle on it, right?
Yeah.
And so I saw people who are amazing at scratching. I was like, it would take me so long to get to that level.
That's how I felt, yeah.
And I'm good at other stuff that they may not be as good at, right?
Yeah, so that became my thing, is I was the super clinical mixer, and that's what I was going to do, and I shied away from the hard path, which would have been to be turntablist.
Yeah.
So hats off to turntablists out there, because that's a challenging thing to do.
Oh man, it's so hard. And what were you going to school for? Like, were you thinking at this point that DJing music was going to be more than just, a hobby?
DJing was a hobby for me, which is interesting when you look at how kids are now, and they look up and they go to a show and they see the DJ on stage, and or the quote unquote DJ on stage, and they're like, I want to do that. I want to be on stage. For me, it was like snowboarding or whatever. It was a passionate hobby for me. And so I was going to school, I was working in a computer lab. I was going to school for information science, which is like database management. And when I got out of school, I went to work for an internet company doing tech support. So I'd be DJing and then doing tech support, until finally one day I would realize that my paychecks from DJing were outweighing my 2 weeks of work. And I'm like, I think I can cut the fucking umbilical cord and go for it. And then I moved to Philadelphia to do it, and worked at a record store called 611 Records. But yeah, it was always a hobby for me, which I think is important for my story, at least, because it was never me trying to be the guy on stage. It was me. It always came from the heart and came from a source of passion. And the music was first for me. I mean, I would DJ for free if I wasn't getting paid to do it. And not to sound like old guy, but it's like chefs saying that, you got to get a start as staging in kitchens and kind of coming up through the ranks. And, a lot of these people nowadays watch Food Network and they want to be that guy in the kitchen right there, exec chef or whatever. And it's like, no, it's a whole process of enriching yourself artistically, creatively by doing it the hard way, but doing it from a position of passion and heart. And that's where I got my career is from that.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too, because I think at that time when you were starting off, the scene was so different, right? And so much smaller. Like, there wasn't even a blueprint you could really look at, right?
No, you just kind of, yeah. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I did, they're little touchstones of my career, things I did with mixes or promoting myself or whatever, was just, I made it up as I went along. I was just trying to figure out how to do it and kind of brainstorming. It's funny, I would be, later in years, after I became known as Dieselboy, people thought that I had some major strategy, the way that people have teams now and they have branding strategy and they have all this and that. It's I never had any of that. I was just a college kid that enjoyed what I did, and I was trying to figure out cool ways to make it better for myself. But I never really had a cool strategy. I didn't have a team. I didn't have a manager. I didn't have nothing. I didn't have social media to leverage. It was me just busting my ass, doing my little drum and bass paper route and trying to figure out how to,
Yeah, well, and I love that, man. I mean, it makes me think you were talking about how you put together these house parties because you weren't seeing the kind of parties you wanted to go to, right? Mm-hmm. And so you just made something that you would want to go to, which I think is kind of the basis of most success stories, right? Is people just trying to satisfy themselves, and in doing so, maybe filling a niche that other people didn't even know they wanted.
And that's an issue. It's been an issue. A lot of kids will be like, "Oh, I don't get booked to play," or "I don't do this and that." And it's always well, if you're not seeing opportunity, then you create your own opportunity. You step up instead of no, you don't pour me it. You find that inner steel and you figure it out for yourself.
100%. I had Destructo, Gary Richards, on the show, and he was saying the exact same thing, that, now people look at what he does, and that, for somebody starting off, you can't really comprehend how somebody can just put on this massive festival. But he was saying, when he started, he just wanted to throw the kind of party that he wanted to go to, and no one else was putting it together. And so he just got together with some friends. That's how every great project starts.
Yeah, I mean, for most people, there's no easy route to success. And for some people, there is an easier route than others. But I feel like for most real solid success stories, it's just like it's a journey, and you have to, that's a journey you have to take if you want it bad enough. And
yeah, it's something I've said on the show before. I forget where this phrase comes from, but it's something like it takes 10 years to make an overnight success. You know?
That sounds right.
Yeah, because every time somebody comes out of nowhere, quote unquote, and is all of a sudden, in every blog, on every label, playing every show, no one sees the work it took to get them to that point,
yeah.
right?
I mean, again, there are these outlier people that get discovered or whatever. But yeah, for most people, when they hit your radar, they've already been like in the trenches for a long time working.
So when did people start paying you to DJ? Do you remember those early shows?
Yeah. I mean, I played a lot of free basement parties. I would play shows. I was in college. I remember, for instance, there was a show in Rhode Island called Casper. It took me 11 hours to drive there. I got the opening slot, played for free, got zero money, and it actually was semi-traumatizing because I was the first DJ, and it was at a roller skating rink. Actually, no, this party was called Massive Dose. I'm getting confused with another party. And it was in a roller skating rink, and the monitors were the speakers in the roller skating rink, and they were about 20 feet above my head. So there was a delay in monitoring, and I was pretty green as a DJ. So I realized quickly that every mix was offbeat. And then I was like struggling up there. So I had a 45-minute set. I played it. The next guy that's supposed to go on was, I think it was Micro. And he refused to go on until they gave him proper monitors. So I had to I was chained to the decks, and I had to play another 45 minutes knowing that every mix was going to get fucked up. And I was like, it was so bad.
That's rough.
But so I would do those shows because I wanted to play, and I played plenty of shows like that. When I started getting paid, it must have been, I started playing local shows, but I was being like a local club DJ, so I was getting like, maybe $50. It was never a lot of money.
Had you started making music or trying to make music by then?
I actually did try to make one track once. There was a track on Rising High Records by a band called Interface called Toy Town that I thought was really cool. It's just a simple James Brown breakbeat sped up with these kind of like T99-esque stabs. And I remember on someone's Amiga computer, I used a mod program, I think it was called Mod. It was a very simple program to make to like loop stuff. It's almost like an early garage band, basically. Okay. So I made that track for myself. But it wasn't until 95 that I really wrote a track when I went to England. It's a long story, but I went to England for the first time and met this guy via a friend who became later known as Tech Itch or Technical Itch, and we did a track together, and that's when I started. But production for me has always been something that I've done it. It's always been kind of like almost a necessary evil for me. I don't love producing. I mean, I love it when a track's done, but producing music for me is a bit of a slog, and I don't get a lot of joy out of it.
And I think that's an important note, right? Is that there's only so much you can force yourself to do on a project. Like I think it's always important to focus on the part of what you're doing that makes you excited, that makes you happy.
100%.
Because that's what's going to get the best artistic result.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't manual labor. This isn't an office job. This is creativity, and creativity comes from subconscious. I mean, you can't force creativity. I was telling Zach earlier, I'm getting ready to start a new mix, and I've been focused on this other project that maybe we'll talk about later called Death Saves.
Yes, please.
But I've been so focused on Death Saves that I haven't gone to the well for Dieselboy in a while in regards to like a new mix. So like I remember I was like walking around a few days ago and I'm like, okay, I tried to send the mental dwarf into the creative mind to hopefully come back with some treasure, because I needed to get inspired on like, because my mixes are very conceptual. So I was like, I'm not just going to do like Dieselboy in the mix and like hit start on a fucking tune. Like it has to be more than that.
Yeah, you've set the bar pretty high at this point.
I set the bar high definitely for myself. So luckily the dwarf returned a couple of nights ago when I was walking home, and I was like, it started kind of coming together, coalescing, and now I feel like I have a pretty solid idea. But yeah, the point I'm making is you can't force creativity. And a lot of times I feel like we're just kind of like radio antennas for creativity. It's like, I don't even know where it comes from. Like I'll wake up sometimes, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I will wake up with a fully formed idea for a dish, a cooking recipe in my head. And I'll wake up and I'll write it, put it in my phone. And I'm like, why did I think of that? I didn't manifest it consciously. It just came into my brain. The mind is a very mysterious thing.
Well, I'm obsessed with creativity and trying to figure out how it works. It's something I understand very little about, but the closest I've gotten is that really, for me personally, the best I can do is kind of just put myself in a space where I am open and ready for it if it hits. But like you said, man, I don't think there's any way to actually make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, working on tunes, like sometimes I have an idea for a tune and a track would come together quickly, but there were plenty of times I'd work on music would take, literally, there were tracks I worked on that took 9 months to finally complete because the inspiration's not there, so you're digging for it consciously, and the ground is much tougher when you're digging for it.
Sure, and then on the flip side, I mean, it's a quick thing, right? It's ephemeral, so I think it's really important that when it does hit, like you said, you'd wake up and have a recipe in your head. Like, you have to get it down right away. That's another key.
Totally. And I've been quite lucky in my creative endeavors where I have been receptive to these signals coming from somewhere, my subconscious, of like just ideas. I'm kind of gifted these ideas from my brain somehow. I've thought about this a lot in like later years. It's just such a fascinating and weird thing because I there's part of me that worries like one day, what if the radio station stops receiving the transmissions and it's like, but yeah, so I've always tried to strike while the anvil's hot with creativity. And when I've tried to produce music and it's not there, it's like you're trying to force a square peg through a round hole. You can do it, you got to push real hard. And it might not be pretty when it comes out the other side.
That's exactly right. And so you mentioned this trip to the UK, which I feel like that's got to be an important moment, right?
Sure,
You're
huge.
making UK music or playing UK music. What was that first experience like?
It's weird. I lived with 3 roommates, this house, and one of them had this online romance with this guy named Steve Jackson. He came to visit us. We got along. They didn't work out, but him and I got along. And then one day, I was starting school. It was in January. Me and a friend of mine, I was like, you know what? Fuck this. Let's take our money that we've been made from our jobs. Let's just go to England. I know this guy. I just met him from England. His name's Steve Jackson. We should go hang out with him. So he was friends with Mark Caro, Tech Itch, who's just getting started producing. And we went over there and I worked on a track with him and got to hang out in England. It was like, I was so young. It was amazing though. I don't really think I'd gone out of the country. That was the first time I'd gone out of the country.
That's huge.
It was cool, and writing the track was cool. And then I ended up I remember now I designed the label for that track because I just learned in recent years to do graphic design, which is something I taught myself how to do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, actually, so I learned graphic design hanging out in the computer lab I worked in because there was no T-shirts that were being made that had the names of any bands I liked on them. So I made a bootleg Moby shirt. I made a bootleg Orbital T-shirt.
I love that, man. That's just like throwing the parties before.
Yeah, and then I started a clothing company where I was selling T-shirts on these these mailing lists like NE Raves and SF Raves. It was called React. React Clothing, and the guy that I did it with is actually a guy that's been doing artwork for me for this Dev-Saves project now. He's a friend of mine from high school. It's just
full circle.
I'm actually just now piecing this together. So I started, that was my first trip to England, and that's where I started writing music. And
did it give you a different understanding of, the drum and bass culture, that kind of thing?
Not so much then. That changed. I continued to go to England every now and again after that. For trips. I eventually started getting booked there. That's a whole other story.
I'm super curious about how people from the UK perceived you as being one of the first.
I can't. I don't want to speak in generalized terms, but I will. They fucking didn't like me.
Yeah.
There was a website, a message board called Dogs on Acid. It was created by the guys in Bad Company.
Yeah, I was on there for sure.
So it was huge, and so people shit on me all the time on that thing. It was like,
Well, you were the easy target, right? You were one of the few U.S.
Well, I wasn't British. And back then, if you weren't British, you weren't drum and bass. And for a lot of these people, it just didn't matter. If you weren't from England, you weren't drum and bass. It's like the hip-hop scene in America. If you're not fucking U.S. hip-hop, you're not real hip-hop. So that's what I faced, and people just hated on me. I remember the first day I played in England, I got booked to play the show in Bristol. The day I played, on the front page of Dogs and Acid, which had, I think, 100 posts, 50 of the posts were about me. 50 posts were about me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, it actually taught me, I had to learn how to grow a pretty thick skin being on that message board. But, I was just I was a fan of drum and bass. I DJ'd it since before it was drum and bass. And, like, these people were like, they couldn't believe I knew shit about it. They didn't know or didn't care that I was in it from the get. They just were like, "You're fucking American, fuck you." And then when I would go play in England, I would play, and I would play like a good set, and then I'd finish, no compliment, no high five, no handshake. Like, while I was playing, the MC would be like, "All the way from the USA, Dieselboy," and I'd look out, and it'd be like arms crossed.
Oh, wow.
It was like, you're in our turf. I mean, it was fucked up. And then the only nights, I remember playing like Fabric, and then a couple of times people would come up to me out of the crowd at the end of my set. I'm like, "Oh shit, finally!" And like they'd be like, "Hey, we're visiting from South Carolina," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course." I mean, it was crazy how they were not open to me playing there. It did not matter, and it was just head scratching to me. I mean, and I remember, even to take it a step further, I remember when I was doing mix CDs, I mean, I was like the conduit for highlighting, showcasing artists in America, so that then they could come over and tour America. And so I remember I'd hit people up and be like, "Hey, can you give me like a new tune, or I'm going to license this track?" And they'd be like, "Fuck you."
Wow.
And I'm like, yo, like, I'm a guy doing the right thing, putting out a good package of music together, trying to promote you.
Right.
And you're only going to benefit from this because you're going to get paid for the license and you're going to get the promotion, and you're going to basically be like, "Fuck you."
I mean, so let's talk about this, because I think drum and bass, more than some other genres of electronic music, it's so insular, right? And so protective of these kind of norms. And I wonder if that's, well, I'm not even going to say wonder, I think that's hurt it in the long run.
1,000%. I mean, I've had multiple conversations with people in drum and bass, especially people in American drum and bass over the years. It's like, I give you an example. I remember I did a mix, I think it was Dungeon Master's Guide, and I used to get like, in order to create original content for my mixes, I would get tracks remixed specifically as special tunes, as exclusives for my mixes. So I would go to a record label and be like, "Hey, I like this track. Can I get this person to remix it? I'll pay them, and then you get a free track to put out." I would kind of finagle these or negotiate these things, which it was such a fucking pain in the ass. But I remember I got like Tiesto remixed. I got Sasha remixed, Wink remixed. And I remember dealing with them and dealing with like the drum and bass guys is like, they were so much easier to work with than licensing music from these drum and bass guys. I'm like, drum and bass, I think one of the reasons, at least in America, that it struggled is that everyone was so so protective of it, and like so anti anyone else getting a leg up, and so like eating eating their own. It was just it's a cannibalistic kind of mood in the scene, and it's completely fucked up the drum and bass scene. I mean, part of it was fueled by dub plate culture, because it was like, who had tracks no one else had? So everyone was like trying to hold on to their tracks or only give it out to certain people. So it was like you're trying to like navigate these like secret cool guy clubs. It was just, every aspect of it was like almost Mean Girls high schoolish in a way.
Was that why you started something like Planet of the Drums? Like, did you just feel like you had to do it yourself?
Planet of the Drums came about because it was me, AK, and Daryl were on Moonshine Recordings. We were the three token drum and bass guys. I had serious issues with Moonshine because they were the biggest game in the States. And what would happen is we do these Moonshine Over America tours every year, these bus tours. And so I would never be on tour at the same time as Darren AK. We'd rotate. And would be fucked up is that they'd always have me open pretty much every show. They always have all of us open our shows. But the thing is my sales would be better than like the next two DJs that were playing after me. So my argument would always be like, why am I opening? Because this is a label tour. So it should be based on sales. The biggest artists get the best time slots. Why am I fucking opening for guys whose sales are far below mine? So that really bothered me for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And I would never play shows with AK and Dara because promoters would book us. They usually put us on the shitty second room sound system, almost always actually. And then they would never book all of us together because we were like, they'd get one of us to bring in the drum and bass kids. It was a fucked up thing where they would charge you $25 at the door, but if you're a drum and bass fan, you'd be getting the $5 sound system where you'd be hearing like your drum and bass, which I thought was bullshit. And then they would book just one of us to kind of as the sirens to kind of bring the kids in, and I felt like our crowd was getting ripped off.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so-
and you three were kind of some of the only figureheads of drum and bass in the States,
because of Moonshine at that point. So what happened was we actually ended up getting booked all at the same show in like 98 or 99 in New Orleans, and we played together, and we were, because we were kind of kept cocooned away from each other, we were very competitive with one another, like who could get which tune and like who was going to get the promo from the record label. And we got the show together and we hung out and realized that we got along. We liked each other's company. And we were like, and I came up with the idea. I said, what if we toured together? We put down our swords. We joined forces, which in a way that most people wouldn't do. We're the three big dogs. Instead of competing, let's get together and then we can use our combined name to force ourselves onto the main room stage, because I always felt that if you hear drum and bass on the good sound system, that it converts you. Because if you're hearing drum and bass on a shit sound system, it sounds garbage.
Right.
So that was the idea behind it, is that we were going to join forces to help push the scene as a whole. And it really did help a lot. I mean, we got booked on like the big stages, and then promoters were like, oh shit, this music does work. And maybe they'll take more of a gamble. We'll bring in more fly in more UK artists. Maybe we'll book more local talent. So that was our goal, was to help improve our lot by joining forces.
Well, yeah, and I want to make sure we mention for any listeners who don't know, I mean, this tour, it became this legendary every year annual thing for what, 15 years more?
Well, I mean, we did it consistent for 10 to 15, and we still been doing pocket shows, like kind of like year-long tours, so to speak, where we're doing maybe 10 shows over the year. We're actually doing Planet of the Drums XX 2020 is this year.
Wow.
And I've just conceptualized the tour art and the intro, and that's actually, we're going to be doing a bunch of shows this year for XS, because I feel like when we did 10, I'm like, all right, we ended on a high note. I remember our intro was like this video. It was like super cool, and I was like, all right, we're done. And then we decided to keep going with it, because we kind of at this point feel like if we're not doing this, or, there's not a lot of people in the States that have a name brand recognition that can still keep pushing this. I mean, not to say there's plenty of great local DJs, local scenes, but as far as like on a national level, we're still trying to like get some weight out, get some traction out of this, because drum and bass is kind of at a low point in America right now, which is crazy because it's so big in England, so big in Europe. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, it's having a big revival.
Andy C sold out Wembley Stadium. I mean, there's like Rampage. There's like,
did he really?
Let It Roll.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
he just did.
Damn.
Then you come over here and it's like kids are like, oh, all they want to hear is dubstep at these shows. So it's like we're still trying to fight the good fight for this shit. But yeah.
Well, so that's an interesting question maybe is, you're playing UK music, what started as UK music in the States. In those early days, like, what's the US perception of you? How would you even sort of sell it to these kids?
Oh, in the early days?
Yeah. Or now. I mean, I'm curious about the way it cycles.
Now drum and bass is globally made. I mean, there's artists from all over the world. But back in the day, I don't even know. Like, I couldn't even tell you. I mean, like I said, I always came from my gut. My gut said this music is good, and I was like, if people hear this and they hear it played correctly or in a good way, it'll resonate with them. And that was the idea. And actually, my big break actually came. I was selling mixtapes on these mailing lists online, these email lists, and it's how people stay in touch with what parties were going on and whatnot. And this guy Lonnie Fisher, who had a company called Ultra World in Baltimore, it was like one of the biggest scenes on the East Coast at the time. He went on the mailing list and was like, who should I book to play this party I have coming up. I think it was called Rave the Bay. I was on a boat, and everyone was like, Dieselboy, you got to book Dieselboy, because I was like the known guy on the mailing list, and he booked me, and I had a good set, and people were super into that set, and he liked it, and that then opened up me playing at like Buzz and all these big giant East Coast parties. But that was like my one in, and if I hadn't have gotten that opportunity, it might never have happened for me.
Really?
Because of those parties that help elevate me. Yeah, there's certain like keystone moments in my career where I look back on and I see like how they helped me get a leg up and move on to the next level of what I was doing. But
well, and I have to imagine, you mentioned nowadays every big artist has a team of people, all of that. I assume you were doing most of this on your own.
I did all of it
then,
on my own.
yeah.
I mean, I had no.
Did you have booking agents?
No. That's crazy to think about that now, not having a booking agent. I mean, it's fucking weird because to get a show, I mean, I would call info lines. I get a flyer to be like, these DJs are playing, plus more to be announced. So I would call the info line to be like, hi, my name is Damien, DJ Dieselboy from Pittsburgh. I'll come play your show for free. And I would sell myself, I was like a telemarketer for myself. But no, so then these promoters would book me, and then you basically wheel and deal on the phone your price, and you would have this kind of like phone call relationship with this promoter. So by the time I'd show up at the party, I would actually be friends with the promoter in a way that now you show up and you're like, meet the promoter for the first time. I actually had a relationship with these promoters. Yeah, it's weird.
Is that how you met, people like Steve Gordon and the Steez guys?
No, I met Steve Gordon. He booked me. It's funny. He booked me for like 3 shows in Baltimore, and it was one of those things where I just never remembered him. I'd be like, oh hi, like I'd meet him for the first time every time. And then one night, I played a show with Nick from Evil Intent, who's now Bro Safari, and I got pretty drunk and hung out with Steve and his lady, and like we kind of bonded that night and became friends. And I basically convinced Kevin Gimble at Circle to hire Steve. And then Steve came on and then started signing dubstep for Circle.
Oh, wow.
And signed Excision, Datsik, Downlink, and then all these people.
And for the people who don't know, they were doing Steve's promo. They were throwing shows.
And Steve's promo went on to buy Lonnie Fisher's Ultra World company.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and they took over some of their shows. Lonnie was actually helping out with some of the shows, but yeah, that's another weird how this. Yeah, it's just all this.
Well, now I mean, you look at what Steve and Kevin are doing. I mean, Circle has merged into UTA. Yep. They're booking Marshmello at whatever $1 million acts.
Funny story about Circle though. So I did a 6.5 year weekly drum and bass weekly in Philly called Platinum, and at the time Kevin Gimble was a rave promoter in Philly, and so we started off did the first three months or so, and then the owner of the club hits me up and goes, hey, can we bring Kevin Gimble on to help promote the night? And I was like, okay. And I knew for a fact Kevin Gimble did not like drum and bass. He booked at some of the shows, but he just fucking didn't like it. But he came on board as a promoter because he was a promoter and he helped promote. And basically, I wanted to do a tour of America with Tekich and Decoder in 98, I think. And I'm like, who can I get to book this tour? I didn't know anybody. So I just reached out to Kevin and said, hey, can you maybe book this tour? You want to give it a go? Right. So he booked the tour. Clayton from Renegade Hardware, the drum and bass label, hits me up and goes, who booked that tour? And I'm like, this guy Kevin Gimble who I work with. He's like, well, I want to bring over Usual Suspects. Can you book that tour then? And then it snowballed, and Kevin became the drum and bass agent.
That's so funny.
And then that's how Circle Agency was formed.
Wow.
And so actually when
you had a pretty direct or indirect hand in that.
Every moment of Circle's existence in the agency game, it's thanks to me. And if you go back and read, Kevin and Steve got interviewed for Billboard last year, and every time they get interviewed, they bring me up. Hats off to them, my dudes. But they say that if without my help, Circle wouldn't exist.
Is it weird for you to see how far they've taken it, or did you always see something in them?
It's not weird. No, I mean, I think Kevin with Circle, Kevin crushed it, and then I feel like he kind of started becoming maybe a little disinterested in doing the agency thing. I think he was getting into poker. I just felt like he wasn't really super about it anymore. And then he brought in Steve, and then Steve revitalized that energy. And Steve has deep resources of passion and creativity and hype.
He's a driven guy.
He's a go-getter. Yeah, Steve's dope. He's awesome. And together, I'm not surprised. I mean, I mean, I'm a little surprised, but I'm not like, oh shit, I can't even believe that. It's like, good for them. They're hardworking guys, and they've earned.
Absolutely.
Earned it.
You can see it, man. I was at a wedding with Steve last summer, and it was a friend's wedding. Actually, Sammy Brill's wedding.
I saw photos of that.
Yeah, it was super fun, and there were a bunch of different DJs. I was DJing for an hour or so, and while I was DJing, Steve came over, and we had both been drinking a little bit, but he was just standing there, like more or less just train spotting this wedding music I was playing and getting super stoked about, dropping an old Belle Biv DeVoe track or whatever. And it was maybe the only time I've had that kind of interaction with him where it was just on a purely music lover's level. And seeing that kind of helped me understand what he does more.
Well, he used to DJ Smash Gordon,
right.
and I did a little tiny tour with him. We did a record label together, Subhuman. We did Subhuman's tour together. I mean, yeah, he's very business nowadays. He's got his hands in a lot of cookie jars, a lot of irons in the fire. But he's super into music, and he's a diehard like me and you. Like he's a believer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Comes from a good place.
Well, and you mentioned, moments when maybe Steve helped revitalize Kevin's interest or vice versa. What about for you? I mean, in a career this long, I have to assume we all sort of fall in and out of love with it. Have there been those moments where you just kind of thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm going to do something else?
I mean, I have had those thoughts, but not because of my desires. It's more because of, the state of drum and bass in America and, work, basically. I've definitely played some shows where you walk in and the club's empty and it's like a super, it's an ego check and you're I ain't shit, But I think that's healthy for people. I think it's good to not live in a bubble the whole time because it's unrealistic. It's frustrating, but and I think in times where maybe other people might have wanted to quit or would have quit, my enjoyment and dedication to DJing has kept me doing this because I love doing this. Like I said, I would DJ for free. If I don't listen to promoters. I mean, I would because I like doing it, but that's kept me at it. Like I've traveled so much. Like the traveling is worn down on me. It's just like the fact that I'm older. And I'm young at heart, but like I used to go out and be hanging out with people my age. Now I'm like hanging out with people that, or not hanging out with, but I'm DJing for people that could be my kids.
Of course.
It's like, so these are certain things that might, like I said, they might slow someone else's role a bit. But it's because I love DJing that I still get that true passion, enjoyment of going out there and trying to play the best set I can. And honestly, I'm playing for myself every night. I mean, I used to be the guy that never looked at the crowd. I stared at the decks. I never looked up, never smiled. People used to shit on me for it. They're like, fucking, he hates what he does. He doesn't smile. And it's like, no, I'm focused. That's why I'm not smiling. It's like when you're out there like in a wrestling match, it's like you're not smiling. You're like trying to fucking win. So I'm out there every night when I playing for myself because I'm trying to play better than the last time. And I'm trying to make myself happy. And I know, I'm my worst critic and the bar is set for myself. I mean, I'm also trying to make people happy.
Right.
But I'm out there for me because it's the competitive nature of it and it's pushing myself. And that's what's kept me still focused on trying to keep doing this.
Well, and in that competitive spirit, I feel like I kind of know the answer to this already, but how do you see the state of electronic music in the States in 2019? We've had this huge explosion that I always talk about in the last 5-10 years of, the EDM boom, festivals, all this kind of stuff. How do you see yourself fitting into it? Do you fit into it?
I mean, I'm an anomaly. I'm a professionally trained chef in a sea of celebrity chefs is what it feels like to me. I can draw for days. I can make comparisons to the food world, which I'm super into.
Yeah, we got to talk about that in a second.
But yeah, so how do I see myself? I mean, I'm like kind of a relic in that sense, but I'm. I always used to wonder what will the scene look like if it becomes commercial or popular because I was always so underground for so long. And now that I've seen it, it's frustrating for me. There's certain people, it's hats off to like the level of production they put into their shows, like the level of professionalism they put in their shows. I mean, there's something to be said for having like 20-foot high stage props and like full LED walls and all this cool shit stuff that I will never have, and having like 2 semi trucks full of equipment following you around the country. But for me, I'm in this scene because of the DJing part of it and the musicality and like layering mixes and all these kind of things. That's what brings me the joy in it. And so when I go out now, just speaking for myself, there's not a lot of meat on that bone for me anymore. It's like, cool, I like your visuals, but I'm not here to see Laser Floyd. I want you to play music in a way that's compelling for me. Like, I always call it that. It's just your light show. It's like, you can have a cooler and bigger and better, brighter light show, but at the end of the day, it's a fucking light show. I didn't get into the rave scene for your light show. I got in the rave scene because I want you to blow my mind with how clever you can be with your music. And what goes for great DJing now is chaining together 1,000 tracks in an hour, which is cool. And it's very good for ADD mind, popcorn brain, setups. But it's like, I'm repeating myself. For me personally, how do I see it? I see it as, here's how I see it. I see it as how probably old school rappers saw MC Hammer at his prime when he had 30 backup dancers. Wow. And it's a lot of visual. It's a lot of service, but it's not, that being said, I like MC Hammer.
Right.
But, if it feels thin to me. At least for new kids coming into it, like I said, if you're there to like see this experience, maybe get fucked up in this whole environment, this atmosphere, there's definitely something to be there for you. And the music sounds good, but I'm there for artistry of DJing, and that's something that doesn't really exist very much anymore. And yeah, that's just where my base point is for this scene. And that scene is not that. The scene I got into is not the scene that it is now.
Well, and I'm glad that you are holding it down for that, man, because I think as people come into the scene, maybe they're attracted by the crazy visuals or whatever, but the ones who stick around, I think, do eventually dig deeper, I think
so. I mean, I do this thing. Sometimes I'll be in an Uber. Sometimes Uber drivers will talk to you. They'll ask me what I do. If it's a long drive, we get into a conversation. If I have my computer on me, I try to show them like what I do and give them an example where I'll play them a track. I'll plug it into the aux cord. I'll play them a track. Be like, okay, hear this track? Sounds pretty good. Play them another track. It sounds pretty good. And then I'll mix it together using Rekordbox. Just show them what it sounds like layered. And I'm like, you hear that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, it sounds better, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's why I do this, because I'm mixing the ingredients together. I'm making those dishes. And I feel like with these kids now, they don't know what that is. They don't know how that you can actually make the track sound better together, and you can create new sounds and new remixes on the fly and create these new things. They don't know that. And yeah.
I mean, it even goes back to the idea of a mashup to me, like to really simplify it.
Yeah, totally.
Like just putting an acapella of one thing over a beat of another thing.
Yeah, first time I ever heard that was in high school at some local club. My mind was blown. Some guy put Public Enemy over Cool Mo D, and I was like, whoa. Like I ran to the DJ, but like, explain to me what you're doing.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those things.
Actually, that just made me remember. At this club I used to dance at in high school, I remember a few times the DJ couldn't make it. I actually DJ'd the club. Holy shit! Wow! Out of
you have all these repressed
a sarcophagus lid slides open. This is wild.
Oh man!
But yeah, so. But yeah, it's a shame because I feel like all these kids now are eating like really tasty fast food. But if they only sat down and had a great tasty menu dinner and had it explained to them each course, that it would be a switch in their heads that would turn. But there's never that conversation, and there's almost never an opportunity to show them. I mean, I always feel that my career, my sets would be improved probably if I figured out a way to get some cameras up there. Because every time I have a show where kids are like able to surround me or like look down on me and they can see what's going on, it's like, oh shit. Every time people come up to me and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea, because you're showing them. When you're a two-dimensional cardboard silhouette on stage with music coming out of the speakers, it's like they have no idea.
Yeah, no one knows what's going on. I mean, you could do that, man. I feel like, you bring a couple GoPros. I mean, it's extra work, obviously.
It is extra work. I just need to only play in clubs where people can see me. Then
well,
easy.
Sure. That works too. And, you've dropped, I think, like 500 food metaphors in this conversation. Oh, yeah. So we got to talk about this. When did the interest in when culinary arts come around?
I mean, I was raised eating processed food and Campbell's soup cans and TV dinners and hot dogs. My mom. It's funny, as a kid, you usually think your parents' food's really good, your mom's. But I thought my mom's food was amazing. And later in life, I realized she was just making a lot of processed food. No offense, Mom. So, my mom had a Betty Crocker cookbook that I used to peruse as a kid, and I used to look at the pictures and want to make stuff in it. So I'm like, oh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until really I was on holiday vacation with my ex with her family in the mountains or the hills of Arizona, and her mom had got these. There's a magazine called Taste of Home. It's like a Midwest wife cook magazine of kind of lowbrow Midwest recipes, casseroles and shit. So her mom had these compiled compendiums or whatever of Taste at Home, 2001, all the cool recipes.
Yeah.
So I had nothing but time on my hands, so I was flipping through these books and seeing these good dishes, and I was like, man, I want to make that. I want to eat that. I'm like, well, why don't I go to the store and something clicked. I'm like, why don't I just go buy the ingredients and try to do it? So I started teaching myself how to cook via that. And then, as with anything, like I said, I go down the rabbit hole. Then I started collecting cookbooks and subscribing to every food mag and reading 20 food blogs a day and watching 20, 30 hours of food TV a week, and just really got into it. And then I started going out to eat all these cool restaurants and trying to meet chefs and just really trying to absorb everything I could about food. And then, started taking advantage of my DJ touring as opportunities to travel to different restaurants. And yeah, I just became fully immersed in it. And people, I don't call myself a foodie. I fucking think that word is stupid. I'm just really food obsessed, and I'm food passionate.
It's safe to call you a chef at this point, right? I mean, maybe not a professional chef, but you were in some competitions or something?
I've competed. I've done pop-ups with chefs. I've collabed on dinners. I mean, I don't call myself a chef. For me, it's a chef is almost a way of DJ. You got to earn the title.
Fair enough.
So I kind of hold the name chef to be sacred in a sense. I mean, I'm a home cook. I'm a very determined home cook. But I can't call myself a chef until I work in a restaurant, at least. And then I would have to work in a restaurant where there's actually titles of chef given out, like sous chef or exec or whatever. So, but yeah, I take my food seriously. I mean, I can hang with chefs. I've cooked dinners with chefs.
When you mentioned earlier, putting together ingredients for a dish was similar to DJing for you. Is that really the way you see it?
1,000%. I mean, the analogy I use is, it's I can show up and be like, here's a really nice carrot, here's a nice potato, here's some nice spices, here's a nice piece of protein, and they're all tasty. You eat them individually, but a DJ makes the composed plate. He challenges your perception of what those ingredients could be. He manipulates the ingredients and creates something truly unique. I mean, I think that is absolutely a perfect analogy for what DJing is, for what real DJing is. It's you're not just delivering ingredient after ingredient in rapid fire succession. You're actually composing. You're using ingredients to make something else from them.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting, man, hearing you talk this whole time. It seems like any interest you have, you just go full on.
I am a bit obsessive, yes.
and so I want to focus this, and I just have to shoehorn this in because I'm obsessed with it, into talking about death saves. And if that was a similar thing, you mentioned your graphic design interests. And for the people who don't know, first of all, what is Death Saves?
So Death Saves is, at this point, a clothing company. We make other stuff as well. We're eventually hoping to become more of a lifestyle brand, I guess, by doing a bunch of different types of things. But right now we focus mostly on clothing and some merch, stickers and pens and stuff. Death Saves is a company owned by a friend of mine, Joe Manganiello, who's an actor known for being Alcide on True Blood. He's Deathstroke at the end credits of the Justice League movie. He's been in Rampage, Magic Mike. He's a lifelong D&D guy, big nerd, big fantasy guy. But the company he owns it, and then me and my partner Maurice. Maurice is a former creative director of a men's streetwear company called Mishka. He has a company called Tough Times. He's a very creative dude. But Joe basically, for a while, Joe had been working with Wizards of the Coast. They make D&D and Magic. And he kind of had become a spokesman out there, out in the ether, discussing D&D and promoting it. And so they loved him because he's a big shiny person to talk about that. And then he got an official license to sell and create and sell D&D merch. So he approached me, asked me to design a T-shirt. I got off the phone with him. Was like, yes, of course, I'd love that. And then I started thinking about, man, we can really blow this thing up. And so I started Googling like what's out there, like what's the competition, and realized that there's like literally there's a hole in the market.
When I saw you guys come out, man, that was the exact thought I had. It's like, this is, why didn't this already exist?
Yeah. So the thing is, and the other thing is that, the aesthetic for D&D now is it's not sanitized, but it's very like, it's very family friendly,
Well, sure. And Wizards of the Coast, right? Giant corporation.
Yeah. And they're owned by Hasbro.
Right.
The art is cool. They use great artists, but what, my old roots of D&D is like the old first edition stuff. So it's like really kind of raw illustration stuff that kind of, touches like, has like a metal vibe to it.
Right. Early
skateboard graphics vibe. And that's where Joe comes from as well. And so I did the research and was like, this doesn't exist. And on top of that, anytime a streetwear company had done anything related to metal or fantasy, like SSUR did a thing for Frazetta, Supreme did they did a thing for Slayer. But anytime these companies, because I'm into streetwear, but anytime these companies would come out with these collections, I was always like, wow, they're really phoning this shit in.
Yeah, it just never felt authentic to me
they have an opportunity to like do something with it or do a deep dive or put some Easter eggs in that shit, but they would just kind of slap their name on it.
Right.
And so the more I started looking into it, the more I started thinking about it, my brain started winding up to a high pitch. I'm like, we can fucking do this well, because like literally Death Saves is like everything from my childhood. It's like everything that inspired me growing up is what we're trying to do. So I'm like, we are perfectly positioned to do this company, do it from a real place. So we're not some corporation putting out D&D shit. We don't do just D&D stuff, but it's like we are true diehards, and like every design we do, there's a huge story behind it. There's like so many levels of details of textures and references, and it's like I can talk for 5 minutes about every piece of art that we've done, or every shirt we've done, because it comes from a true place. And
it's been super successful also, right?
We've been successful out the gate. Luckily, people have embraced what we're doing. It's shocking, actually, because given how much negativity there can be in like chat forums or YouTube comments or whatever, I'm just kind of a nerd to like just people talking shit all the time. I have to say, this particular project, we've gotten 99.99% positive feedback and very little negative.
It was that kind of thing, man. Like literally when I saw you guys come out with whatever that first line was, and I mean this as a compliment, I got really mad, which happens to me a lot when I see good ideas.
Because it beat you to the river?
Yeah, well, not even that you beat me. I would have never even thought to do it, but then I saw it and I was like, well, obviously, God damn it, this is so good.
There are very few original ideas out there, and when I realized what happened was, when we started getting into it, I was like, man, this is going to be too good to be true. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, we actually found one of these rare, untapped ideas and a huge market for it. And I know, again, we're making stuff for people out there that have these interests, but I'm designing this for myself. I'm designing stuff that I think is fucking cool. So I'm like pouring 100% of myself into like these designs and this thinking, and like, the Instagram posts I put up, like all this stuff, because it's like really, it's just like I'm channeling my 15-year-old self.
Well, it's got to feel good to have
amazing.
A new creative outlet after 100%. All this time.
Yeah, as Dieselboy and being in the rave scene, I'm having to deal with the scene as it is, and being like, I'm bringing skills to the table that aren't appreciated. I'm playing music in the States is not really appreciated. But I'm still passionate about it. So to be able to create something passionately and then have it appreciated once again, it makes me feel like I did when I was, 2000, like, I'm getting appreciated for what I'm doing because I believe in what I'm doing. And when I get the feedback that people are into it, it's life affirming. And it's really something that I probably needed at this point in my life. I could not be happier to be doing this project.
And it's probably easier to then go back and get excited about DJing again, right?
Yeah. Well, Well, I've been putting so much of my brain power into death saves and like going to bed thinking about it and waking up, getting on my computer, designing, that I actually, Dieselboy's kind of been pushed off back a bit. I've been doing my shows, but I haven't been focused on like new music, new projects, which is changing. This week I'm starting a new mix called Heart of Darkness.
Yes.
But now that I'm getting inspired again to go back to do like more mixes and stuff, I'm able to pull some of that creative juice off of death saves because I'm feeling pretty invigorated. I'm feeling pretty fucking hulked up creatively. So
I love hearing that, man. And again, for me, like I don't think I've ever actually talked about this on this show, so maybe this is my coming out moment, but I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons nerd, and I have been for a while. And play all the time. And to me, it just spoke so strongly to me, man.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad you guys are doing it. We're going to wrap this up here. I have to, this has nothing to do with anything we've been talking about, but I just had a note that I remembered. I had to ask you about this because I was super curious. Going way back to the heavy touring days when you did the Area 2 tour.
Yes.
I just need to know about that experience because I looked at the lineup for that, which I don't think I ever actually saw before. And it was what? Moby's tour with David Bowie and
Busta Rhymes, Blue Man Group, Tiesto, John Digweed, Carl Cox. So let me take you back a little farther than that. So when I was in college at Pitt, I was DJing occasionally at this club called Metropole, and one night they booked Moby. This was in 91, I think, maybe early 92. So they tasked me to go to the airport to pick up Moby and his girlfriend. And I was like shitting myself because I was a huge Moby fan. I told you I made a Moby t-shirt later. So I picked him up, took him to his show, watched him play, and he actually stayed in touch with me via email a while after that or via phone because he was buying a new computer. He knew I worked in a computer lab. He wanted a computer suggestion, what he should buy, et cetera, et cetera. So years and years go by, and then he puts this tour together and he invites me on the tour because he remembered me from back then. And it kind of followed and knew that I'd gone on to be Dieselboy, done all these things. And apparently I found out that his girlfriend was like really into me that night and he was really annoyed with me, which I had no idea. Fun story, just going to throw that in there.
Yeah, why not?
So I played that tour. What was really strange about it was that Tiesto at that point hadn't really broken America. And I knew who he was because I would read DJ Magazine and Mix Mag, but Tiesto actually got booked after my set, so he wasn't even headlining.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he was like 4 DJs back from the headliner. But every show I'd play, there'd be like a small gathering of like maybe 10, 20 people that would gather right at the end of my set to see Tiesto. Some people would have signs, and I would always think to myself, how the fuck did these people know who this guy is? Like, he's nobody.
Right, yeah.
so strange.
He'll never be anything.
Yeah, and then I remember I got to talk to Moby one day in the commissary food area, and we got to reminisce about that show in Pittsburgh years ago. But he was like super nice guy, and I was always touched that he invited me on that show. That was actually the first tour, remembering, where I tried Cristal champagne for the first time, because for the last show they gave everyone a bottle of Cristal.
Oh wow!
So that was my one, I think, only taste of Cristal.
That's your rock star
moment. It's very tasty. I think another highlight. I think I was with my MC Messinian at the time, and I guess during one of the shows, the one in Philly, his little brother walked by a dressing room and saw David Bowie changing. I think that was a story James used to like to tell all the time.
Did you talk?
I never talked to Bowie. I mean, I appreciate David Bowie. I'm not really a Bowie fan.
Yeah.
I mean, I like some of his music. I didn't talk to Bowie. I didn't talk to really anybody. We were kind of like in our own. Me and James were in our own area, and I think I talked to John Digweed once, maybe.
Yeah, that's the way those tours work a lot of the time.
But it was cool to be on it. That was the first time I played the Gorge outside of Seattle, and I was like blown away by how beautiful that venue is. But yeah, it was a cool opportunity to tour. I mean, I was lucky to do it.
That's great, man. That lineup blew my mind.
It's such a mixed bag of people. I mean, especially Blue Man Group is like the real
That's
odd
actually,
one.
Yeah, they're like the dark horse on that lineup for sure.
But it was a cool tour.
That's awesome, man. Is there anything else we haven't covered? Anything you want people to know about? Anything you want to talk about
So we're
before we
doing
get out of here?
POTDXX this year.
That's Planet of the Drums.
Planet of the Drums. What's cool, I'm just going to talk about the theme. So this year, the graphic is we're getting this guy Riddick, this artist who did the Death Knight jacket and shirt for Death Saves.
Oh yeah.
So once a year he does a painting. So I convinced him to do a painting of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse to represent us. And then the Planet of the Drums logo is the Apocalypse Now type style. So the Apocalypse Now, 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, so it's kind of a little meta there. And then I actually need to sample the movie for the intro. But then for my new mix, I'm inspired. I'm calling it Heart of Darkness, which is actually a book, an early 1900s book about a guy's journey into the center of the Congo, the darkest part of Africa.
Right.
But then there's also a documentary about the making of Apocalypse Now called Hearts of Darkness.
Okay.
So I'm actually kind of peripherally tying my mix into the Apocalypse Now. So there's a lot of like twisty little aesthetic things that kind of came together.
There's there's like a blog house group called Hearts of Darknesses in 2008, 2010.
Don't know that one.
Yeah, I'll send you something. I don't know if it fits the theme.
Well, I came about with the idea actually because I was thinking about mixes or intros that I had on hand, that DJ intros I never used. And one of them is, I'm going to retool it, but it sounds very like you've like entered this, like I can see like coming through a clearing in the jungle, and there's like this mountain with like a skull carved into the side of it, and you have this like this sound. What soundtrack would be playing then? I have an intro that sounds like that, and I was like, that's it. And the intro says Heart of the Jungle, and I was like, Heart of the Jungle, Mike. And then I was like, then my mind knit the rest of it together. But anyways, that mix should be coming hopefully within the month.
Nice.
Those mixes are so much work.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man.
It's a lot of work.
Well, we didn't talk much about it, but I mean, your mixes are legendary, and those who know, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's how a lot of people first heard of you, right? Was these early legendary mixes.
Yeah, it's the mixes. I mean, and as time went on, I kept escalating the difficulty level for mixes, like crazier and crazier intros, and more and more cleverly edited and layered tracks. And the last one I did about killed me. It took me about 100 hours, Destroyer 2. This one I'm aiming to have like a really solid mix, but maybe like 75-minute mix, 90 minutes. But yeah, it's been a while for a mix for me, and I'm looking forward to like getting that out there. So look for that.
100%, man. Yeah, I'm stoked for that. Last question. I ask this at the end of every interview. Just a real quick thing off the top of your head. You don't have to think about it too hard. Just a time in your life, and it could be recently or it could be from when you were a kid, when in a moment music really deeply affected you. And that could mean like change the way you thought about something, was tied to an important moment in your life, just something that gave you goosebumps. Just the first thing off the top of your head.
I mean, easily, it's that moment when I was stood in that record store, 12-inch, Underground 12-inch is what it was called, in Pittsburgh. And when the Stabs came in on Anastasia, I like some switch clicked in my head right then. I'm like, I'm tied inextricably to this now. Like it was just that moment. That's when my life really changed. I mean, obviously, it's where it became my career. But I knew that door opened, and then I was going to walk through that door. And that was going to be, no looking back. So.
I love that, man, and it makes me think. I mean, those kind of moments. That's what we're all chasing, right? Like I've said this before to other people, but I had those kind of moments early on in childhood. And when you hear that for the first time and you feel a way you've never felt, I mean, I still chase that. And that's hopefully what you want your DJing to do for other people.
Yeah. I mean, but those moments happen, you can't predict when they're going to happen, but yeah, when they do, yeah, it's awesome.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks a lot. This was great.
My pleasure.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Dieselboy. That was a pleasure, man. I really enjoyed that. For everybody out there listening, I hope you feel inspired. I hope you're feeling good. Hope you're ready to go out there and crush whatever you're doing today. Don't forget to catch Dieselboy on the Heart of Darkness tour and on the Planet of the Drums 20th anniversary tours. Both of those are coming up. The tour dates are in the link in the description of this episode. The Heart of Darkness mix is dropping in early March. He's just killing it right now. My name is Willy Joy. As always, you can reach out to me, backtobackpod@gmail.com or at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. I hope everybody out there has a great week. I'm about to go run around Mexico a little more before I gotta fly home. So until then, take care of yourselves, take care of the people around you, and have a great one. I'll see you next Tuesday for Back to Back. This is Willy Joy. Peace.